Hi, everybody. Today is Thursday, June 19th, 2025, and our friend Alex Krainer is back with us. Welcome back, Alex.
Thank you for having me, Nima. Good to be with you again today.
Netanyahu finally, he achieved what he wanted for such a long time, attacking Iran. And the attack was somehow surprising for Iranian commanders, leadership, because they were negotiating with the United States. They were supposed to negotiate on Sunday. But before Sunday, the Israeli forces attacked Iran, and together with other intelligence from other countries, CIA, MI6, I don't know. How did you find the way they attack? Is somehow a combination of what has happened in Russia and with the leadership in Hezbollah, in Lebanon with Hezbollah, decapitation and the drone attack, as we saw in both attacks.
Well, the Israeli attack came on Friday the 13th last week, right? And it was. I think that the nature of the attack was a surprise for the Iranians, and the timing of the attack was surprise. So it was partially successful. I think that the Israelis, they have a good intelligence network themselves, and I think that they also have extensive support from other Western intelligence agencies, as well as uh, other agencies like IAEA. So they were able to target Iranian leadership, and they were partly successful in that. But the decapitations, Hezbollah style, didn't quite work out that way. And so Israel's gambit is to open the fifth or the sixth front in their war against everybody, and the craziness of that gambit is that it's practically a suicidal mission, uh, unless they can bring the United States and everybody else on board to try to finish off Iran for them. I don't know that they can be successful in this because the United States, for all their supposed military power, they spent 20 years in Afghanistan trying to keep the Taliban from power, and after 20 years they failed, and they had to withdraw in a humiliating way. Then they ran this operation Prosperity Guardian in the Red Sea, trying to defeat the Ansar Allah in Yemen. They failed. Then they launched Operation Rough Rider on the 15th March this year, which Trump announced as now they're going to bomb them like nobody's ever seen before. Well, that didn't work out either. And Iran is no Ansar Allah, and Iran is no Taliban. Iran is a regional power that has not only prepared for this clash against the empire for more than 20 years. They also have support from Pakistan, from Russia, from China, and from other players in the region. United States can bring their carrier strike groups and their destroyers, but everybody knows now that they have limited assets on those, limited ammunition, limited number of missiles on those ships. Once they fire them off, then what? They have to leave the region and refuel and resupply themselves somewhere else in port. Well, once they run out of missiles and out of air defense missiles, they're sitting ducks. They're absolutely lame sitting ducks in the middle of the sea. And if they stay there, the Iranians will 100% sink them. There's no doubt about that. I would be surprised, maybe Trump doesn't appreciate that, but I would be surprised if there's anybody in the Pentagon that doesn't appreciate that. So the whole gambit that Trump is now apparently pursuing is so staggeringly idiotic that I always have to, think back and say they can't possibly be this stupid. There's got to be something else to it, I don't know. We'll find out. I have the impression that Trump very badly needs to pass his, big beautiful bill through U.S. Senate. That is coming, I think, on the 4th of July, and I think that the odds of him passing that bill through the Senate are much increased if he is running the pro-Zionist side. And I think we won't really know his true intentions until that time, or unless we see the United States actually going for an attack. But if that happens, if he orders an attack on Iran, there's going to be a mutiny in the United States. There's going to be resignations from his administration. Servicemen in U.S. military might decline to follow their orders. This is a dumb idea at every possible level. So I can't even understand that Trump is doing what he's doing. He's alienating everybody that supported him, and he's now carrying water for exactly those people who have been attacking him for 8 years nonstop, dragging him through impeachments, through all these court cases, 2 assassinations attempt, and now he's their errand boy. It doesn't make any sense at all. So my take on the situation with Trump is that either they somehow got to him, or he's running some kind of a double deception, or I guess it's possible, given that he's 79 years old, that he's not quite there, that he's being influenced by people around him, and he's kind of just being carried in the direction in which he didn't want to go. But now he has to own it, because he has to, at the very minimum, he has to keep the appearance that he has control over his government. So now he has to own the consequences. And the way that they would get to him, I don't know that the money would do the trick. That they would tell him, okay, if you go along with us, we're going to make sure you get adequately rewarded with money and businesses and whatnot. It could be more something like, if you don't do this, we're going to kill all your children, everybody in your family. And if that side of if that force, the globalists are good at one thing, it's they're good at killing people. And I think that the fact that he's the president of the United States doesn't matter a little bit. They've already killed John F. Kennedy and his brother Robert F. Kennedy. Killing people is never a big important obstacle for them. So I think we're going to find out. Attacking Iran will be suicidal. It's going to have consequences not only on United States internal politics and on further deterioration of their military, a very, very significant deterioration of their military. It will also have consequences on the region, because I don't know if General al-Sisi in Egypt can hold back Egyptians and Egyptian troops from joining. It could mean an overthrow of General Sisi. There could be a social uprising and a revolution in Jordan. Civil war in Syria is already quite likely to happen in the near future, and then this whole Turkish Israeli gambit might end up overturned back. And then who knows what happens in Turkey? The Turkish people are very, very strongly against Israel, and Erdogan's fulminating against Israel while he is supplying them oil, while he's helped the Israeli by overthrowing Bashar al-Assad, which was a massive score for the Israeli. And by helping Western powers take down Iranian missiles launched at Israel, his whole shtick is wearing thin, and the Turkish people could at some point rise up and overthrow his regime as well. So there's very, very massive downside risks for the United States getting involved against Iran, and I don't quite see what they stand to gain that they couldn't gain by peaceful means. The whole story about the whole story about the Iranian nuclear program is exactly as fake and as phony as the story about Saddam Hussein's weapons of mass destruction. From the very get-go, the name of the game was regime change. That's what they're after. They don't care about peace and stability in the region. Nobody's worried about Iranians having nuclear weapons. Really. Iran hasn't attacked anybody since, I think, 1730s, 1740s. So for nearly 300 years, Iran never attacked any of their neighbors. On the other hand, you have Israel that has been attacking their neighbors practically nonstop since they've existed as a country. And we see that their leadership are a bunch of genocidal maniacs with absolutely no moral compass and no humanity whatsoever. But we're all worried about the Iranians as a threat to peace in the world. And then nobody's even daring to mention that Israel has up to 300 nuclear warheads, and that they have overtly and explicitly threatened the world with the Samson option if Israel's existence should be jeopardized. So the whole story is fake. The only reason why they're doing this is because they want a regime change in Iran. And why do they want the regime change in Iran? Because Iran is an obstacle to their total hegemony over the region. And once they have total hegemony over the region, then they have the lead arbitration role over who gets the region's natural resources, and then you have the path wide open to Western colonialism to reassert itself in the Middle East.
We had today Vladimir Putin and Xi talked to each other, and they were talking about the case of Iran. It seems that the concerns on the part of Russia and China are rising and just increasing. Alex, when it comes to the war with Iran, it's not China and Russia. We see a very important resistance within MAGA. People are against Donald Trump with this sort of movement, with these sort of policies. Here is what Matt Gaetz tweeted on X, and he says you remember him. He was nearly became U.S. Attorney General under the Trump administration. He supported Donald Trump, okay? And he says that the only country that doesn't care about IAEA is Israel. And do you think that these people have some sort of leverage or some sort of influence on the decision makers in the United States with considering the Trump administration?
Well, I think that indirectly they do have considerable influence, because you can't not notice when people who were otherwise supportive of you start turning away from you, start giving public statements to that effect, and expressing their dissatisfaction openly and overtly, which is all the more surprising why Trump is behaving the way he is behaving. It's completely at odds with pretty much everything he's been saying ever since he entered politics in the United States. So it's hard to explain this turn of events, but there's got to be some kind of an explanation. And I think that, Tulsi Gabbard also said that if United States joins the war against Iran, that she will resign. And so, I am certain that there's a lot of dissent in the military circles, in the Pentagon, not to mention the sailors aboard these carrier strike groups, who might all find themselves at the bottom of the sea if the United States attacks Iran. So they must be thinking, are we being used as pawns in this game? It's so staggeringly idiotic. it makes no sense whatsoever. So I think that something else must be going on. And I have received information that two flights from Iran landed in Oman, and another foreign private jet, and so not Iranian. So there is there is a suspicion, so unconfirmed news, that the negotiations, the discussions between the Iranians and the Americans are actually ongoing. So I hope that we're going to have good news, especially after 4th of July this year. But until then, all bets are off. Anything might happen any day. And, with Israel there in the region, there is there's no limit to what they're capable of doing. They're capable of launching a nuclear strike against Iran. They don't care. Somebody, Craig Murray, a former British ambassador to, I think, Uzbekistan, Craig Murray, posted the news on Twitter that, these in Gaza, when they distribute humanitarian aid, when they distribute food to the people of Gaza who are getting starved, they've been shooting at the people then. Well, yesterday I read that they've been shooting with tanks, and I mean that doesn't even compute in my brain. And then just this morning, I saw footage of the aftermath. I think it's the worst thing I've ever seen. And I mean, we've seen so much atrocities over the last 2 years. It's hard to make it worse. But I cannot even believe that people do this, that there are people in existence who will actually pull the trigger, who actually think like, hey, all these people are going to gather together, and then we can shoot with tanks into the crowds and we're going to kill a whole lot of them. I don't know. I must have seen a few dozen mutilated humans strewn all over the place. And so Israel has its supporters in the West. Western governments are all bending over backwards to show their support for Israel. Israel has the right to defend itself. Israel has the right to do whatever the hell they want. Nobody else has the right to defend themselves. Palestinians don't have the right to defend themselves. And so, Israel is enjoying full, complete, 100% impunity for whatever they decide to do. And I think that if they launched a nuclear missile on Iran, that people like, Keir Starmer and Ursula von der Leyen and Lindsey Graham and all these kinds of people would say, well, we call on everybody for maximum restraint, but Israel has the right to defend themselves, and everything Israel does is right and sacrosanct. And Iranians, it's their own fault for getting a nuclear projectile striking at them. So anything is possible, and I hope that we pass through this crisis without seeing exchange of nuclear weapons.
Alex, from the CNN reported that Iran is using a new generation of missiles on Israel. And from the footage that we've received from Iran, look at the way that it's going toward Israel. Just fired from Iran, and here is the other one. It's something different. We haven't seen this before from Iranian attack. And the BBC reporter says that when they say that they fired the missile, it lands in Israel in 4 to 5 minutes.
Oh.
And Washington Post reported that Israel is not capable of this war of attrition. If they continue this war, they gonna run out of ammunition run out of the missiles they need for their air defense system. I think Donald Trump is putting himself in a position that nobody, no president before did it. And because he gave the green light to Netanyahu to do this, I don't know if he wanted to achieve some sort of leverage, because Netanyahu is just destroying everything. Look at what's happening. You look at the building in Tel Aviv, in Haifa. It's the scenes somehow look like what has happened in Gaza. They're just destroying the whole building. How do you see Israeli capability as this war goes on?
Israel already at the beginning of the war in Gaza, the genocide, not really the war. Already then, representatives of the IDF were saying, we must make sure that this doesn't become a long war. Israeli defense forces are structured for very quick, short-lasting wars. They can be effective in this, but if this drags on, it's going to exhaust us. It's going to deplete us. And so they've been at war, in Syria, in Lebanon, in Gaza, against the Houthis in Yemen for more than 2 years. No, for nearly 2 years now. So it's been more than 600 days. And so they've been bleeding ammunition. They've been bleeding air defense ammunition. They've been bleeding troops. There is no, and not only, but their economy has been decimated as well. And then the Iranian strikes against Israel have been very strategic. They have destroyed their the headquarters of the Mossad, Ben Gurion Airport, the port in Haifa, oil refineries. So Israel has sustained very, very extensive damage. And so after 2 years of warfare, there's no way that Israel is in a position to take on Iran in any way, shape, or form. Even attacking Hezbollah was extremely risky for them. And, the IDF themselves, IDF veteran generals and a group of, defense experts in Israel produced an extensive 100-page report that they submitted to the Netanyahu government saying that going to war against Hezbollah would be suicidal. Okay, well, situation has changed. They were able to assassinate the leadership of Hezbollah. They've been able to overthrow the regime in Damascus thanks to Erdogan and the Turkish deep state. And so now, at least from that point of view, they are in a, let's say, slightly less vulnerable position. But I think it's not, this problem didn't go away. They just took care of it for the time being. But everywhere there's still bleeding losses in Gaza, in Syria. Yemen is still lobbing a missile here and a missile there. And we don't know what might happen if a civil war breaks out in Syria. But all of those factors are risk factors for Israel. And yesterday I found on X a video between Ben Gvir and one of the heads of the Mossad in a scream fest. And well, I don't understand Hebrew, but the translation was that Ben Gvir was screaming at the Mossad guy, "Why did you provoke Iran?" And then the Mossad guy screams back at him, saying, "We didn't realize how powerful Iranians were with their missiles." And apparently, also the Iranians have been able to hack into the Iron Dome or Arrow 3 missile defense, air defense system, and make their rockets turn around and attack Israeli targets. And first time I saw a video of this, I thought, okay, well, it's a glitch. But then I saw another two, I think, at least another one. Well, if this keeps happening again and again, then maybe the Iranians are telling the truth. Maybe they did hack into their defense systems, and now even what they have, even what the Israelis have to defend themselves with, is not as effective as they expected that it should be. And so this morning I saw news that the IDF officials were saying that they have to ration their air defense missiles. And Iranians still have thousands upon thousands of drones and cruise missiles and ballistic missiles. And all of this keeps
Alex, and
barely.
they're firing 25, which with each wave that they're implementing, 25, 30 missiles. It's
Yeah.
somehow.
Yes, exactly. And it's nonstop. And, all these stories that, the Iranians, look, the second day they fired 2,000 and now they only fired 20. Next thing they're going to say that the Iranians have to go take people's washing machines and refrigerators to take out chips for the missiles, and that they're running out and all this. But we've seen all those psyops before, with in the war with Russia. I think this is very likely the end of Israel. I don't see how they bounce back from this. And then I think that if the United States join in this war, it's only going to accelerate it, and it's going to be the end of Western hegemony in the region, because they're going to get thrown out altogether. I don't think that they can reverse course.
You mentioned something about the Israeli reaction if they feel that they're going to lose it and they're going to use nuclear weapons. We've learned from Pakistan is that they're going to, if Israel uses nuclear weapons, they're going to give nuclear weapon to Iran. And it's something, somehow we had experts on this podcast. They say, no, they're not going to do this. They had some belief that Pakistan would do this. And if you sitting in Pakistan and looking at what's going on, here is what Netanyahu said about both Iran and Pakistan.
Mission that we have is to prevent a militant Islamic regime from meeting up with nuclear weapons, or from nuclear weapons meeting up with a militant Islamic regime. The first is called Iran, the second is called Pakistan, because if these radical regimes have nuclear weapons, they will not obey the rules that have been obeyed in the last almost 7 decades.
Pakistan, look at this video and the way that Netanyahu is talking about Pakistan. They're going to be the next target. They're going to be, if something happens to Iran. These people, somehow, when you look at the situation, they don't know if everything goes in the direction that you've mentioned, a nuclear bomb. Everything gets extreme, and extreme decisions would come to the mind of the leaders in that region. They're going to go to the extent to destroy Netanyahu and his sort of regime in Israel. Don't you think that somehow when we talk about Pakistan and the way that he said before, said to Turkey that they're going to provide Turkey with nuclear bombs, I think they're serious in the way that they're picturing, because they see Israel as an enemy.
I think so. I only wonder, because you couldn't drop a nuke on Israel and not kill hundreds of thousands of Palestinians as well. But it doesn't make a lot of sense. You're going to be ending up killing a lot of innocent people. I think that one of the reasons why the Iranians don't even care about having nuclear weapons is because they're obsolete. Nuclear weapons can wreak great destruction, but indiscriminately. So you're going to inflict a massive, massive collateral damage on whatever target you choose. At the same time, the Iranians have developed precision-guided hypersonic missiles, which can inflict the same damage as a nuclear weapon, but on a precisely chosen target. So you can take out, let's say, the headquarters of the Mossad without killing a lot of civilians in the city, which is what the Iranians have done now. You can destroy an oil refinery, you can destroy a port, you can destroy an airport. You don't need to kill millions of innocent people. And so I think that this whole saber rattling with nuclear weapons is more serving as a negotiating leverage. And I think that the Iranians themselves are, they very intelligently made the proposal to say, like, okay, we will limit our nuclear enrichment, uranium enrichment program to 3.6 to 3 whatever it is percent for only civilian uses, but we demand that Israel's nuclear warheads also be dismantled and destroyed. So that's a perfectly reasonable position, and I think that everybody in the world would welcome it, because that would actually improve the stability and peace in the region. But nobody is going for that. The UN is in favor, the Iranians are in favor, all the countries in the region are in favor except for Israel. And so the whole global south, the Chinese, the Russians, Pakistanis, everybody's in favor of this solution. The United States, Great Britain, and Israel are not. So that tells you everything you want to know. They don't care about peace. They don't care about stability. They want hegemony in the region. And to have that hegemony in the region, they need a regime change, and they need a completely defanged, toothless Iran, so that they can do with it whatever they please. And you know what that is? That's colonial plunder and taking 92 million Iranians and turning them into slave labor. That's their ultimate objective.
Alex, the people who were captured, who were collaborating with Israel in Iran, many of them, you mentioned the initial hours of the Israeli attack on Iran were somehow successful because there were a lot of people in Iran, these collaborators, these people who were, they said that they were preparing for this for such a long time, 10 years, a decade, preparing for this attack on Iran. And when you look at the attack on Iran and you compare it to what has happened in Russia, it seems that the mastermind of this attack has prepared this attack for such a long time. Then they tested it on Russia before going to Iran and doing this to Iran. Do you think that the leadership in Iran and Russia are getting to the same conclusion as we thought?
I would be surprised if they weren't. And I think that, obviously it's not just the Israeli. I think it's it's Western intelligence agencies collectively. And we've even learned a little bit about the way they work, because it's not like people go around with a, Mossad or MI6 business card and say, like, hey, here's my card and I'll give you money if you give me information or work for me or so on. What they do instead is they come to the country, they bring in these NGOs and various charitable organizations, and then they do, charitable work, and they certain cultural events, they sponsor cultural events, they sponsor the media, and they use this front to develop a very, very widespread intelligence network. And they take time to learn exactly where the right pressure nodes are in the society that they can influence, where they can obtain information, where they can where they can bribe someone when they sense who in the societies has a friendly disposition to them, who is unhappy with the regime. And then, very often these people don't necessarily even know that they are working for, ultimately, MI6 and the British Foreign Office. They think that they're working with these helpful Westerners who want to, bring progress, women's rights, or whatever. And so they cooperate and provide information that the intelligence services then can reconstruct into actionable, effectively actionable information for them. And this is, this is something that the British have perfected now for centuries, this type of intelligence work, and they're very effective in it. Just to put a concrete example on this, we had, for example, we had an exchange of communications between the British representatives in Syria, or in charge of Syria, with the Obama administration. And so the man who was communicating from the British side was a man named Jonathan Powell. And Jonathan Powell was the chief of staff to Tony Blair while he was prime minister. And then Jonathan Powell went off and did his private thing. He set up this private NGO called Intermedia, right? No, Intermediate. And so he started to develop an extensive network with these insurgents with the view of overthrowing the government of Bashar al-Assad. So he communicated with the Obama administration to inform them that they have developed this network, that they're working with the insurgency, and the man he was communicating with was Jake Sullivan. And Jake Sullivan was then informing Hillary Clinton, that's the famous email, hey, in Syria, Al-Qaeda is on our side. That's where he got the information from. Jonathan Powell, who was Tony Blair's chief of staff, communicating with Jake Sullivan to inform Hillary Clinton that, hey, we got this covered. And then in that same exchange of communications, Jonathan Powell also informed Jake Sullivan that they have also begun work in not only in Syria, but also in Myanmar, in Somalia, and in Yemen. So what do those four countries have in common? All four have been at the receiving end of terrorist attacks, of extremist movements, sabotage, assassinations, civil wars, and mass death. And just in Syria, between 2012 and now, there's been 1 million victims. And now these very same networks, just to give you where this could go, are very active in the government of Bosnia and Herzegovina, in the Balkans. And the RUSI think tank, Royal United Services Institute, have pretty much designated Bosnia and Herzegovina, the Balkans, as the next front in the West's war against Russia. And so, now in Bosnia is crawling with British assets, with their NGOs, with their charitable organizations, special forces, UN soldiers, what have you. And they're all doing all this work. So, if tomorrow you get some kind of attack where the key people were suddenly taken out with like a rocket straight through their bedroom windows, that's how that information comes to the people who pull the triggers. And Israel, as the imperial project of the British Empire since the beginning, is the beneficiary of that. We're only hearing about the incredible genius of the Mossad and how amazingly capable they are. Well, they're capable because they have support of the whole Western intelligence network, the MI6 and the CIA and all of them. They all give their best information and best intelligence to the Israelis, and then they can just pick off who they need to pick off. But at the same time, other nations start to figure things out. And as you said, I'm certain that the Iranians and the Russians and the Chinese are paying very, very close attention to what is happening and how it's happening. And they will be effecting countermeasures, and they will be rooting out these networks. And then the empire is going to find itself blinded again.
Alex, here moments ago, Maria Zakharova was talking about the situation with Iran and Israel. Here is what she said: Russia is warning the United States against getting involved in military actions against Iran, saying it could lead to uncontrollable consequences. And what does that mean for Russia and China? Because we know that Iran so far, yesterday Vladimir Putin said Iran so far didn't ask for any sort of help. They're just fighting against Israelis. And it doesn't seem that Iran does need Russia or anybody to get involved, because they're just fighting Israel. The air defense system of Israel is just, I don't see they're being capable of continuing the conflict this way that is happening. Washington Post reported for 10 or 12 days they can have the ammunition to fight Iran. But putting all that aside, what are the main issues with the conflict in the Middle East for Russia and China? I see that if something happens, something big happens, that they're warning the United States. They know if the United States gets involved, they can damage Iran, but Iran can do a lot to the region, those people who are supporting the United States. How these uncontrollable consequences, what are those in your opinion?
Well, it could bring to an all-out war between the side that supports Iran, the axis of resistance, against the Western interests and their proxies. It would very likely lead to the end of Israel, first of all. It would also be the end of places like Qatar and Bahrain, and possibly the United Arab Emirates. It would probably topple the regime of al-Sisi in Egypt, or he would have to join the war on the side of the axis of resistance, which, given the Chinese help, would be likely. And it could mean the regime change in Jordan and Turkey ultimately. So that's just to start with. Very probably it would bring an end to Western hegemony in the region, because the West really doesn't have much to go on anymore. Already from the 1990s, the Pentagon officials knew that they basically had two levers of power to maintain their hegemony in the region. One of which was relying on their allies, Egypt, Turkey, Jordan, Israel, Saudi Arabia, and so on. And the other one was projection of power. So meaning, if somebody starts to act independent, they just send their aircraft carrier strike groups and they just scare everybody into submission. Well, that doesn't work anymore, either one. So the projection of power doesn't work anymore. Everybody has seen through it. And the US, the Western alliance, is also failing, because you can see that even the Saudis are not so loyal anymore, and they are realizing that the game is up. So all of that is imploding. Militarily, they cannot defeat Iran. So if it goes to war, it's going to lead to very, very bad consequences for the West and for Israel. But it's also going to be very, very damaging to the region. Economic destruction, casualties, possible nuclear fallout, and so forth. So it's best avoided. But when we talk about what the game is from the Russian and Chinese side, I think it's, well, obviously Iran is a very important node in the Belt and Road Initiative. Is Iran? I meant to say Iran. I don't know. Maybe I said Israel.
Iran, you said Iran.
Okay. Uh, Iran is an important member of the BRICS alliance, BRICS group, and Iran is also an important anchor of the new security architecture on the continent that the Russians and the Chinese want to create. Because up until now, for the last more than 100 years, we had an insecurity architecture on the continent, and this was deliberately created by the British in order to be able to keep the region destabilized at all times. And the reason for that is because they wanted to prevent the emergence of a regional power that could go independent, that could defend their sovereignty against the empire, and let's say reject the empire's diktat. And so that now is, obviously Iran, but also in Russia and China. And so they created this arc of instability that goes, it runs from the Baltic states down to the Mediterranean, the Baltic states, the Balkans, Turkey, Greece, Eastern Mediterranean, and then it runs across all the way to the Koreas. From in the southern crescent of the Eurasian landmass, you have all these flashpoints of instability that could be detonated one against the other, and they made sure that you had countries on hostile terms one against the other, like Saudi Arabia versus Iran, which used to be, they're now friends, but for a long time they were enemies. Greece versus Turkey, Azerbaijan, Armenia, North Korea, South Korea, India, Pakistan. They made sure before the British left, they made sure to partition India, Pakistan, India, Bangladesh. And then, so you could name a number of these flashpoint. They're everywhere, and their objective is always to keep the region, to keep the whole continent destabilized, because you cannot rule it militarily. There isn't enough troops that you could conquer the Eurasian continent and police it by force. So what you do instead is you do divide and conquer. You keep everybody at war against everybody else. So we've had a century of war basically there all the time. And so what the Russians and the Chinese and the Iranians want to do is they want to change this. They want an actual security architecture so that you can have the whole continent in peace, devoting their energies not to war making, but to industrial production, development of infrastructure, trade, and prosperity, so that the kinds of developments that you've seen in China and other places can then spread across the whole continent. And we remember that almost 20 years ago, Vladimir Putin was trying to convey his vision of the continent united from Lisbon to Vladivostok. That you have like a trade zone where you could develop business and trade and build prosperity and build economy and cultural exchanges and so on. Today, Vladimir Putin talks about something he says is a symphony of civilizations. Well, this is exactly the opposite of what the British Empire has been doing for the last 200 years. They've been keeping everybody at war. They've been keeping all of the global South in destitute poverty in order that they can loot the place and enslave the people unmolested. When I say enslave, once upon a time it was outright slavery, but today it's working for peanuts that you can barely eke out a living. And we've seen that after more than a century of colonization of the African continent, all these countries are still they're poor. Huge percentage of the population don't even have electricity. There's no meaningful infrastructure to speak of. Agriculture is underdeveloped. Health sector practically doesn't exist. Education is poor. and the place is still overrun by terror groups and separatist gangs who are always almost invariably sponsored by these Western intelligence networks.
Alex, if the United States participates directly in the conflict with Iran, I would assume Hezbollah and Houthis and the people, the resistance in Iraq, they're going to join the war. They're not going to sit and say, just see the United States attacking Iran. I don't know if the United States is thinking of that because they made an agreement with Houthis in Yemen. But look at what would happen if the Strait of Hormuz and Bab el Mandab in the Red Sea, these are two important points, crucial points for the global economy. If they can just put an end to this sort of communication that is happening and in these two important points, how is that going to influence the United States economically? The Strait of Hormuz, Bab el Mandab. Can we understand that, or maybe Europeans would be influenced by that a lot more than the United States? But it's something when you talk about the United States, people say that the United States has somehow can provide everything they need within the country, but the economy doesn't work that way. The economy is a network. If something happens to the network, everyone would be influenced by that sort of clash or some sort of problem that is happening within the system. And how do you see the future of these two this conflict, considering the Bab el Mandab and Strait of Hormuz?
It would be hugely destabilizing for Western economies in general. United States, Britain, and Western Europe, and probably Japan as well. One thing that you could, if you shut off the traffic of oil from the Persian Gulf, I think that you could see oil prices skyrocket into triple digits. And who knows? It could be $100. It could be more than $100. It could be $200. Nobody can predict, right? Very likely would see a spike in interest rates, a sharp spike in the interest rates, which are already high, which means that you would have a collapse of the prices of treasury bonds. This is the single most, the market for the U.S. 10-year treasury note is by far the most important market in the world, because the price on that defines pretty much everything else downstream. So you would have the collapse in price of the U.S. treasury instruments, which on the other hand, they represent collateral for a lot of financial institutions. So you would have a collapse in the value of their collateral. So you might that they would have to revamp the whole repo market, like back in 2019. It would be an economic Armageddon, very likely, and the rise in the oil price, you would end up having very high levels of inflation. And so then what does that mean? That, on the other hand, means also that you would have a collapse in purchasing power, a cost of living crisis. So you might get social uprisings at home. It would be very, very hugely destabilizing. So, as I said in the beginning, the whole thing is so profoundly idiotic at every conceivable level that I really have a hard time with it to even believe. The Western powers, not so much the United States, but the European Union and Britain, they have very severe political crises at home that they're trying to shove under the carpet by canceling democracy. But all these incumbent governments are very deeply unpopular with their people, and every time the people get to exercise any degree of democracy, they want to throw these governments out. And so I think that a war would be useful to them, for cohesion, for another justification to cancel democracy, a way to explain away, what's happening to our healthcare system. Where's the food? Why do we have shortages of food? Why is the economy disintegrating? Where are the jobs? Why are the pensions not being paid correctly on time, and so on? So all of these things. If you make a big war somewhere, whether it's in the Middle East or against Russia, you can always say like, oh well, it's the evil Iranians. That's why we don't have jobs. It's the we have to defend Israel, which is why you can't get an appointment with your doctor, or why there's no medicines in the pharmacies, or why there's no food on the shelves of the supermarket, and so on. So you can explain all your failures away by pointing the finger at an external enemy, right? So and you get a degree of social cohesion which wouldn't be there, because these governments are all so deeply unpopular that people can't wait to get rid of them. And so to preserve themselves, this is the model that's been used by the oligarchies for thousands of years. When things at home get unbearable and there's a risk of social uprising, well, at that point you yell barbarians at the gate, and you scare everybody that these barbarians are going to overrun us and kill our children and rape our women and destroy our fields and our homes. So you send all the men, all the fighting age men, you send them off to some war abroad, where most of them are going to get slaughtered, which is what the oligarchy actually hopes to achieve. And then, they wipe the slate clean. They say, okay, the war is over. It was very damaging, but now, we're going to fix everything. And they ride the crisis, but they preserve the continuity of their model of governance. And they preserve their hold on the levers of power. Whereas without the external enemy, there's a risk that there's going to be a revolution at home. And that the people are going to wheel out the guillotines, and that a lot of these people who are in power are going to end up like Mussolini and like Ceausescu and so forth.
I literally believe, Alex, what's going on in Ukraine and right now in Iran, between Iran and Israel, are the very signs of that the old world is dying, and they're there are people in the United States, they don't believe that the things are not happening, are not going the way that they want to be. Even you have some moments of sanity with the Biden, even with the Biden administration. Anthony Blinken, before leaving Washington, said we cannot do anything with the sanctions against Russia. We don't know. We have to study what has happened with the sanctions, why we are not that much capable. You see Marco Rubio coming in and saying the same sort of thing. The US hegemony is just, but after all, looking at the situation, it doesn't seem, they say something, they have some moments of sanity when they're talking about it, but the muscle memory is just the same. They still feel that they can do something. They can, let's go to the next step. Let's, if we can get something, if we couldn't get something with Ukraine, let's go on Iran. Because if you look at this triangle, Russia, China, and Iran, they started with Russia. It didn't work for Russia, and right now they're fighting with Iran in Iran. I don't see Israel being capable of defeating Iran. I literally don't see that. And this participation, as you mentioned, of the United States would worsen the situation. It's not going to improve in the way that would benefit the United States. Do you feel that what's going on in Iran would be the last step on the part of the empire?
I think it's going to accelerate the end of the empire. It's not going to be the end. The British have been recolonizing parts of the world for the last, I can't really tell because it's been done covertly, but at least for 10, 15 years, and so they've been taking increasing political control in a lot of African countries, like Tanzania, Kenya, Nigeria, Cameroon, and so forth. and they've been again developing this colonial dominance over those countries. And so that, that does give them a certain degree of power and wealth with which they can influence events around the world. Like already 1992, their foreign minister Douglas Hurd was saying that Britain was punching above its weight, and we intend to retain this position of power. And so ever since, they've been doing this covert way of penetrating countries, getting control over the levers of power through the media, through NGOs, through corrupting local government officials, sending their special forces to defend their puppet regimes, and also where they don't have control, orchestrating regime changes and assassinations and color revolutions and all this. So in this sense, it's not, the empire is not going to just implode like a house of cards. They're going to continue, but it's, the farther the more battles they lose, in Russia, in Ukraine, in Iran, and so on, the weaker they become. And so the process will take some time, but I think that it will fold all the way, because today, I'm certain that the Russians and the Chinese exactly understand this game, and they are paying very close attention to the events, and they will continue to fight the empire. Because if you don't, if you think that you're just going to secure your like a buffer zone, take part of Ukraine, create a buffer zone to insulate yourself from Western invasions. But if you leave the empire intact and you let it regain its strength by colonizing Africa and South America and East Asia and elsewhere, well, they're going to just come back for you, because the Western powers in more than 300 years never stopped antagonizing Russia and trying to overthrow Russia, balkanize it into many small pieces, attack it, invade it, inflict terror attacks, sabotage, proxy wars all along the Russian southern and western border. So that's going to continue indefinitely. They never gave up, and they never will. So, if you want peace, if you want to secure a long-lasting peace, you're going to have to figure out a way to quarantine this British imperial system. And that means that you have to disenfranchise them everywhere. Eventually, you're going to have to put their offshore centers out of commission. You're going to have to put them outside of the law. And you're going to have to probably overhaul the monetary system in the world, so that, they cannot use money and trade relations to influence governments and to plunder wealth from them in these hard to trace illicit ways. And then you can basically insulate the parasite and extract them. And then, Britain becomes an independent island nation that goes back to minding its own business and having, let's say, friendly and constructive relations with other governments and countries, rather than having an exclusively predatory relationship with everybody else in the world.
Many people may not know Iran, because we were talking about breaking Russia into federations. If you remember, when the conflict in Ukraine started, right now in Iran, there was an article in Jerusalem Post talking about they want to break Iran in different parts, different oblasts, Turkish, Kurdish, Baluchis, and go ahead. And many people in the West don't understand the diversity of these people in Iran. You have all of these, it's almost a rainbow of cultures in Iran. We have the same culture, but a rainbow of different groups coming together, because it's an ancient land, it's not something new. And we have Jews, Christians, Muslims, Zoroastrians, all living together for many years, for many years,
For centuries.
yeah, for
I mean,
centuries.
Jews have been there since what, 3,000 years practically, unmolested, second largest Jewish community in the Middle East. And at the same time, the people like Benjamin Netanyahu are trying to persuade everybody in the West that the Iranians want to create a second Holocaust, which is so completely idiotic. But that man doesn't even speak without lying. So I don't even know why anybody listens to him at all. But yes, you're right. The wet dream of the Western empire, of these globalists, is to balkanize any power, any nation that is capable of challenging your dominance. So, they want to balkanize Russia, they want to balkanize Iran, they even want to balkanize the United States, because the United States actually came to be as a rejection of the Western colonialist imperialist rule. And so it does have still those Republican foundations and traditions. And so long as the Western empire can control the United States and use it for its own ends, they like to keep the United States intact. But as soon as the United States starts to say, wait a minute, why should we be doing this? This is costing us extremely dearly. And what's our benefit? We're maintaining all these military bases everywhere around the world. We're in poor relations with everybody. We have horrible reputation. We're constantly at war. We're losing people. We're losing money. We're losing weapons. We're losing ammunition. What is the upside? Why don't we just have good relations with everybody else? Well, at that point, the United States becomes no longer useful to the empire. And now then they start to encourage, partition of the United States. And they say like, hey, maybe we can, California can come out and be its own country, and maybe Texas can come out and be its own country, and so forth. And so they encourage these movements because, it's easier to balkanize somewhere, then you can keep countries all at war against each other. Of course, if they partitioned Iran, they would, definitely use one part of Iran to wage war in the other part of Iran. Then you loan each side money to be able to fight the war. You sell them weapons, and all the wealth from those countries then keeps flowing to you. It's exactly the same model that's been applied all over the world for centuries now. But I think that the world is seeing through it. I think that in the United States now, it's not just Trump. The rejection of the global empire, of the globalization, is actually quite broad based. And so I think that even if you took Trump out or compromised him or whatever, you would still find that there's a lot of resistance in the United States to this European colonialist model of governments that they want to impose on everybody else by force. And of course, the force mainly comes from the United States. They are the ones who always have to come in and wage war and overthrow governments and bomb everybody to pieces. But I think that the Americans themselves are starting to understand that this has practically destroyed their country, destroyed their economy, destroyed their relations with other countries in the world. And so more and more people want nothing to do with this anymore. So this is why you get, more and more of these sane statements from people like Matt Gaetz and Marco Rubio and J.D. Vance and Marjorie Taylor Greene. This is gathering momentum. It's the awareness of the people is rising, and they're rejecting the European colonialist approach to governing the world. And so, eventually it's all going to run its course. And the Western empire, will fail as all other empires through history have failed. There's no exception. So I think it'll be a good day for humanity when that happens.
Alex, before wrapping up, during the Second World War, we have many Jews in Iran, by the way, but during the Second World War, we know that Netanyahu is a Polish Jew and he's running Israel. Many Polish Jews came to Iran during the Second World War with the situation they had in Poland, and they were welcomed by Iranian people. And many people may not remember these, we're not told that this happened, but I don't know if those people are alive in Poland or their children, they remember what has happened. The Iranian people, when we talk about the Iranian, there's so much. I don't know if you have to go to Iran to understand the society, the culture, the sort of kindness of these people. They don't want to harm anybody. They don't hate Jews because Jews are part of the Iranian society. And the way that Netanyahu is trying to picture Iran is somehow unbelievable. And I wanted to mention that because many people are saying that, the other day I was talking with one of these Brazilian doctors that I was talking with. He said, "Do you have Jews and Christians in Iran?" And yeah, there are a lot of Jews and Christians in Iran for such a long time. These people don't understand. They want to make a war between different religions, but it's not that. It's something different. It's all about hegemony, as you mentioned. It's all about how you can run these countries and Russia, China, and all of that. And I think people need to understand this is not a religious war. It's something beyond that.
Yeah. It's not a religious war. They use religion only as a way to divide people. Because when you have religious diversity, like I mentioned, as they're preparing the terrain in Bosnia to trigger a Balkan war. In Bosnia is useful to them because it has three constituent peoples. You have Serbs who are Orthodox, you have Muslims, and you have Croats who are Catholic Christians. Well, it's easy enough to orchestrate a massacre. You get a bunch of, say, Croatian thugs to go and kill a bunch of innocent people in a Muslim village. And then you get a bunch of Muslim thugs to go and exact revenge, and then they stage an even bigger massacre of Croatian civilians. And then, the next thing, everybody's at war against everybody because they are now scared that, oh, look, then the media takes over and they amplify the story. It's done deliberately in a very loud and obvious way so that everybody knows. Everybody has heard that, oh, these Croatians have massacred a bunch of Muslims, and oh, these Muslims have massacred a bunch of Croats. And then they throw in rapes in the mix, and the next thing you have everybody polarizing, and you have a war. British and other Western intelligence agencies do this as a matter of course. That's to them like drinking water for you. It's nothing, and they do this. You'll find probably hundreds of examples of this through history. In 1990, I think it was, well, I don't know, 1994, 1995. I forget exactly the year. At the time when the war in Bosnia started, maybe it was 92. At that time, you had an alliance of Serbs of Croatians and Muslims in Bosnia fighting the Serbs. And then, somebody somewhere decided that was not a good situation, so they wanted to break up the alliance between the Serbs and the Croats, between the Croats and the Muslims. I'm sorry. And so this is exactly what they did. First, they staged a massacre of Croatian civilians in a Croatian village, which was attributed to Muslim units. And then after that, they staged a massacre of Muslims in a Muslim village by the Croatians. As we later found out, the whole thing was orchestrated by British special forces. But it did break up the alliance between Croats and Muslims, and now you had everybody against everybody. Croats against Muslims and the Serbs, Muslims against Croats and the Serbs, and Serbs against Muslims and the. So it was a large bloodletting, and they've done it in Syria, they've done it in Yemen, they've done it all over the place, everywhere, and they keep doing it.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Alex, for being with us today. Great
Thank
pleasure.
you, Nima. Always a pleasure. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.